Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Optimizing Mother podcast. I'm so excited to be here today with Estee Lieblich, who is an early childhood consultant and a parenting coach, and she's a certified temperament specialist. Her business name is Head to Heart, which is mindful parenting for heartfelt relationships. And what's so special and unique about Estee and the way she coaches parents is that she infuses the truth, warmth, and brilliance of Hasidus, and that is the real truth behind all the parenting approaches. So I'm really excited to be here with Estee today. Hi, Estee. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
You know, you have so much experience, and I've heard from people that you've really supported and helped and given them a boost and a confidence in their parenting. And is it okay if I just drive right into my first question?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I would say it's fair to say that the number one thing that many parents are concerned about today is their children's emotional health and well-being. And, you know, it's very common for parents to send their kids to therapy or follow parenting experts on social media, get parenting ideas, do's and don'ts. And the trend is really almost like top and center is emotional health. So I want to talk about it. Let's hear it. What do you have to say?
Sure. Okay. So yes, we definitely live in a day and age where we're very focused on our children's mental and emotional health. And we believe that catering to their emotional health will bring us to our goal, which is emotionally healthy children, right? We all want that. So we focus on validating their feelings, empathizing with them, helping them feel heard and seen and understood. And the truth is that children do develop a sense of safety and security when they're in the presence of strong connection, right? So we're doing the right thing. And especially, we're possibly from a generation that likely didn't get validation of emotions. And so many mothers operate from a place of fear because we want to ensure that our children grow up differently, right, than we did. So we try extra hard to provide children with a softer approach. And often that entails walking on eggshells, treading extra carefully so as not to upset them, worrying a lot about how they're being affected by people in their life who don't have this extra sensitivity. It almost like in this day and age, it seems like archaic and truly damaging when children are around people who lack that sensitivity. And so we kind of have this idea that if we want to raise healthy children who are empathetic, we must model it and give so much of it to our children because we believe that that's the only way to raise an emotionally healthy child who is empathetic to others. So, you know, we keep this goal front and center, like you said, at all times. We read every book, we consume, all this parenting advice on social media, and we're inundated with all these messages, and they pretty much line up, like you're saying, with this one message: validation, acceptance of feelings, empathy, etc.
The picture you describe is very accurate. So I'm curious, you almost are implying that there's a problem with that. What's the problem with that? We're better mothers now. We're more in tune with our children's needs, and we're helping them feel seen and heard and understood. Isn't that exactly the way to get our goal of emotionally healthy children?
So unfortunately, the short answer is no. And I'm saying this as a parenting coach who believes that empathy is a wonderful and necessary quality in the parent-child relationship. And together with so many clients, we've seen how it really makes all the difference in the relationship, especially when children and parents, either one of them are experiencing big feelings and stress. But let's take a step for a minute back and talk about what is emotional health. An emotionally healthy person is someone with a well-developed emotional intelligence, right? It's our ability to cope with both positive and negative emotions, which includes our awareness of them. But more than just how we think and feel, emotional health is also about it's like a sense of well-being and our ability to cope with life events. So we know that emotional health is very, very much affected by the food that we eat, how much sleep we get, exercise, the connection to the people around us, etc. And so really true emotional health entails the integration of different parts of ourselves. And this is where I'm going with this quest for emotional health, that true balance and integration cannot just focus on one thing or in one part of ourselves. So empathy alone won't produce emotionally healthy children.
Okay, so you're not putting down the empathy. What you're saying is that just being empathetic all day is not going to produce these wonderful empathetic children. So taking that a step further, does that mean that focusing your parenting on emotional health won't necessarily lead to emotionally healthy children?
Exactly. Focusing on the emotional health of our children is not the recipe to produce emotionally healthy children. Viktor Frankl, he's a renowned psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. He has a famous quote and a very important philosophy when it comes to happiness. Happiness must ensue. It cannot be pursued. It's the very pursuit of happiness that thwarts happiness. And the more one makes happiness an aim, the more he misses the aim. So really, he's describing happiness as a side effect of finding meaning and purpose in life. And that happiness occurs when we're least focused on it. The happiness is the reward. And this can be applied to emotional health as well. It might be our goal, but the way to reaching that goal is not by focusing on it and pursuing it.
Okay, so you're saying something very counterintuitive right now. We're not denying that emotional health is important. What you're saying is the way to be emotionally healthy is not by chasing and pursuing emotional health.
Exactly.
That's very interesting. So what is the way to get emotional health? Or let's take it back to, our sources in Torah and Chassidus. What does the Rebbe say regarding children and chinuch and how to make them emotionally healthy?
So the Rebbe actually gave a fascinating talk in 1965, and I heard a recording of it quite a few months ago, and I don't think it's gone viral yet. It really needs to, because it's truly mind-blowing. I haven't stopped thinking about it since I heard it a few months ago during a Farbrengen in Yitzhak Kislev in 1965. And these are the Rebbe's words, and it's translated in English, but I'm going to be quoting the English translation. Never before did children suffer from psychological illness, may heaven protect us, to the extent that they do today with the advent of new philosophies in child rearing. When parents raise their children on vitamins or pills and in playing football and baseball, when they slip in words of Tyrus Maisha as of being secondary important to the child's free moments, not already taken up by his eating, his drinking, and playing. After all, they reason he's only 3 or 4 or 5 years old. It's not yet 6 months before his bar mitzvah. This causes children to, heaven forbid, suffer from psychological illness. And again, these are the Rebbe's words translated in English. And I'm continuing now. Because they are nurturing the child with soul, instead of nurturing the child with a godly soul. Their child has a uniquely Jewish soul, which is an actual piece of the divine. Whether his father or mother wanted or not, every Jew has 2 souls, as the Alter Rebbe writes in the beginning of Tanya. And this divine soul is pulling their child to a godly life. But if his parents are pulling him into a mundane soul existence because they care that he'd be able to make a living, $1, $10 would be better, $1,000 is even better. If he makes even more, he'll be a celebrity and featured in the who's who with the important people of the world. This is the attitude that creates friction and leads to psychological illness. The time has come to recognize that we need to start thinking about this. How does he lead his family? How does he lead his community? How does he lead his surroundings? What spheres of influence does he have? The Rebbe continues, first and foremost, parents should not prioritize making a living and only add the extra beauty of living a Jewish life in its entirety as a bonus. No, first and foremost, the primary focus must be on infusing Yiddishkeit. This is the way to live a proper life of worth. This fundamentally changes the entire approach to education. Education does not begin with consulting with a doctor about a formula to give your child, and then consulting a psychiatrist as to which activities are appropriate to ensure the child doesn't suffer from a split personality. From the time of a child's birth, from that point onward, the godly soul begins having an influence on the child and helps the child ascend upwards. Here is where a mother and father need to be careful and assist the child, not to start stuffing him like an ox, filling him with vitamins and pills, games, songs, and dances, and only sticking in aleph beis and more in between dances. No, as soon as a child wakes up, he needs to begin with the words, my da'ani, the words, you have returned my soul. In this way, you will raise healthy children because both his soul and his parents are pushing him in the same direction upwards. Indeed, the Alter Rebbe's words, comments in the word Shema Yisrael writes, a Jew neither wants nor can be disconnected from God, heaven forbid. The parents just need to make sure that they don't disturb this divine nature. For if they do, they can cause psychological illness that are more severe than all medical illnesses.
Whoa, Estee, the truth is I heard it in Yiddish when it was going around, but I was really listening this time when you were reading it. Basically, a lack of a spiritual connection can lead to psychological illness. Is that what it's saying here?
Exactly. And imagine the Rebbe said this in 1965. And I think we think of ourselves as the generation that's dealing with the most distress right now in psychological and emotional health. And we're definitely more in tune to things. So the Rebbe said this in 1965, like how much more applicable it is in this day and age right now. And the Rebbe is literally telling us what's needed to raise emotionally healthy children so as not to cause psychological distress is to focus on their nefesh elokis. So unfortunately, we kind of compartmentalize different components of our life when we raise children. Like there's the mitzvahs and Yiddishkeit. There's the values that we want them to embody. There's their social and emotional health, their physical health, right? So we wash nagavasar, we make breakfast with them, we give them their vitamins, we try to get them to eat broccoli, take healthy snacks to school, we take them for well visits and dentist appointments and, plan their play date so they have good friends, make sure they get to school and to bed on time. And we forget that really everything that we're doing is all in one the same. if we are looking to integrate all of our parts, then we need to address the needs of both souls. And the Rebbe is telling us that they work hand in hand.
You know, Essie, people tell me all the time, like with branches or the podcast, like, you know, there is a separation. I've noticed it because sometimes people are like, we don't want to hear about, you know, we want to hear about parenting, as if there's like these two separate things. And I love what you're saying about integration.
I'll tell you that even in my own journey, and this started, you know, my journey into parenting started when I had my first child 15 years ago. And even for myself, it really did feel separate for a long time. It felt separate. And it was actually such a huge gift from Hashem when it all started meshing together. And then you realize it's all the same. It's a holistic approach, body and soul. It all comes together. When there's that lack of integration, that's when there's problems. And it's also hard as parents to like feel that we have so many different goals, and it just feels so overwhelming. Like, how do I do all of these things to raise a child who's emotionally healthy? And then realizing that the very things that we're doing day in and day out are actually giving our children exactly what they need. So really, we must start integrating our goals. Our goal to raise proud Jewish children who have strong Hasidic values, and our goal to raise physically and emotionally healthy children. They're one and the same goal. We need to understand that pursuing emotional health is not the path to raising emotionally healthy children. The path to raising emotionally healthy children is feeding their nefesh elikis. And it's interesting because the physical and emotional needs of our nefesh habahamis are very evident. Child is crying, he's hungry, he's tired, right? Nefesh habahamis conveys its need very, very loud and clear and in the most demanding of ways. But to raise healthy children, the needs of both souls need to be addressed, and the child's soul and his parents have to be pushing him both in the same direction upwards. Those are the Rebbe's words. So how do we not disturb this divine nature? For mental health to thrive, we can't feed one soul and neglect the other. We need to really mindfully feed the nefesh elikis of our children to achieve their emotional health.
So practically, what does that look like? What does it look like to feed the soul, the nefesh elikis, in order to achieve this? In other words, so how do you reach this goal of emotionally healthy children?
So in very practical ways, it's doing the things that we already do, such as Maida'ani, Negelvasser, making brachas with our children, saying Shema with them at night, but maybe doing them more mindfully. Like a lot of times it just becomes this routine thing that's really said without any mindfulness, and doing it more mindfully. Even if it's a small child who is hungry or tired, knowing that, wait, of course we take those few minutes to wash Negelvasser, to make our bracha, to say Maida'ani, to bench for the food. So these very mitzvahs are necessary for their health, more so than vitamins. And for example, if you don't have time to read stories to your children at night, knowing that just saying Shema with them in a joyful, mindful way is even better for their emotional health. And then all day, really infusing our homes with Torah and Hasidic values. You know, that very idea of infusing our family life with simcha. I mean, that is addressing the needs of the nefesh elikis. So really, it's kind of like we need to put our head in this space where when we believe this, it becomes so much easier to apply Hasidic concepts to everyday life with our children and really talking to them in very, very practical ways. I'm going to give you some examples. A child who's extra shy, you know, I see you have a really hard time doing something, or I see that you're extra shy, right? Going out of your comfort zone is hard, but it's so worthwhile. It's exercising a muscle that needs to be strengthened, and you can do this. And hopefully it'll get easier with time. You know, the idea, you know, Pesach's coming, right? Going out of our personal limitations, our you know, Mitzrayim being the word Meitzarim. This could be applied to children who are having a hard time with really anything in their life where they feel this need to go out of their comfort zone, knowing that when you're training them in this way, you're feeding their nefesh elikis. You know, you're uncomfortable.
People will actually probably hear this after Pesach, but it's like the message of Pesach lasting every day, you know.
And it could be used every day, exactly. You know, you're uncomfortable calling a sick friend or conveying gratitude. I get that feeling. I understand it. But it's not about us, though. It's about the other person. And we push ourselves to do the right thing, to give to others, even when it feels hard for us. Talking like this to our children is really where it's at. Another example, your sibling is crying or making you angry. It's a normal response. I get how it's so triggering. You know, you should also know that when another Yid is in distress, we're supposed to feel compassion for them. That's the goal. You're not there yet? Okay. But know that that's your destination. A child who's feeling very worried about something and very concerned, you know, and it's Shabbos, and just even mentioning that idea, you know, today's Shabbos. And when you worry about it today, like it's happening to you right now, you know, that's not what Hashem wants for us. He wants us to have a day of rest from worrying, a day of rest from, you know, not thinking about what's happening or what happened during the week, a day where our nervous system can relax from worries. How about putting those worries aside? Put them in a little box, put your thoughts away until Matzah Shabbos, and Matzah Shabbos will get right back to your concerns.
So interesting, Esty. I'm hearing you say these examples and I'm like, that means I have to do that myself. Like, can you imagine if I took my little worries on Shabbos and be like, like, Sarah, wait till after Shabbos to think about it. Like, it comes naturally to say it to your kids when you're like actually doing it. You know what I mean?
Yes and no, because, practice makes perfect, and you could practice with your children and you'll start embodying those beliefs as well. It could happen the other way as well. If a child believes something very limiting about themselves, saying something like, I understand why you believe X, Y, and Z about yourself, and you feel like you can't change, that you're born like this, and that's a hard reality to live with. It's also a very limiting belief, and really, you're not limited to your nature. You have an actual part of Hashem within you that is limitless and not bound to nature, and you have the ability to change. It's not easy, but it's within your reach, and I'm here to help you.
Esther, can I ask you a question on one of the examples you gave?
Sure.
So you gave the example about being uncomfortable, calling a sick friend or conveying gratitude. And like you were saying, it's not about you and pushing yourself to do the right thing. So I think that, one of the concepts that is discussed a lot now is like codependency. And like, if you get kids used to just doing things for other people and people are like, you have to take care of yourself and self-care. What do you think the Hasidic approach would be to raise an emotionally healthy child in that sense?
Our lives are full of relationships. And tending to relationships means being aware of the other person and their needs. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it takes a lot out of us. In the process, we can't lose ourselves. Codependency is an unfortunate process where someone loses themselves and there's no sense of self anymore. It's all about the other person. We're looking to be healthy, emotionally healthy people. We take care of our own spirituality, our own physical needs, but knowing that our own spirituality and physical happiness is also very much tied in with other people. And when we give to others, it makes us happy. It's a fact.
Wow. Esty, I love how you took like these examples of Hasidic concepts and like you just brought them down into everyday life and with kids. It's like, I almost feel like maybe we should collab and write a book about this for kids.
That would be a dream. I'd absolutely love to.
Okay. You never know. Okay. So do you have any more examples? Because I'm enjoying hearing them.
Yes. Okay. So for example, if it's a child's birthday and they don't necessarily want to make a farbranga on their birthday, right? They're shy, they shy away from attention and loud parties. Speaking to a child about that difficulty, about that discomfort, but also telling them that specifically on your birthday, you're supposed to be celebrated and you're supposed to be celebrated in the presence of your friends. And I guarantee you that you will be so happy if you do. The inner kind of happiness that comes when your neshama is aligned with its true desires. That's really what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to help children understand that giving to others, going out of their comfort zone, that's a kind of inner happiness that comes because their neshama is now aligned with its true desires. That's what feeding the nefesh elokis means. This is what the nefesh elokis wants. And we're helping the child to accomplish that. Another example might be you're feeling, and again, these are probably with older children, you're feeling super triggered by the situation with your friends. It's a thought process that you might not even be aware of that's causing you to react this way, right? Our thoughts and beliefs influence our emotions and our behaviors and reactions. So let's try to figure out what that is, right? So we could replace the thought that's not serving you well with a belief that serves you better, right? So you're not as triggered. It's really the idea of Mayach Shal Dal Halev. It's a tool that we could help us to control our emotions. Another example might be, I see you're really nervous about a test today. Say a kapitel tehillim while you put a coin in the pushka. The Rebbe speaks about doing these two things at the same time. And ask Hashem to help you succeed and feel calm. So these examples are really showing that to raise a mensch, empathy alone won't do it. All of these are examples where you're taking a child out of what's comfortable for them and towards the next part, which is really encouraging and even prodding our children to do what's right, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it is hard. And yes, it's hard work on their part and on our part to constantly talk to them in this way, to really infuse them with these life messages, these values that they need. But these are skills that are so necessary for our children to be emotionally healthy. We don't want self-serving children. We want children who are confident, engaged, capable, in tune with their needs, but also very much in tune with the needs of others and are able to push past their own discomfort and work hard to reach their goals. And we need to remind them what they're really, truly capable of. They're limitless.
It reminds me, I remember the first time I heard the concept that somebody wrote a letter to the Rebbe about the fact that he was depressed and he wrote I in the beginning of the sentence. I don't know, I never verified this story, but it's still brought it out so well. And that the Rebbe circled the word ani. And, the realization that when you're so focused on yourself, that is what leads to depression. It's depressing to think about yourself all day and the power of getting over yourself, like thinking about other people and the joy that that could bring.
Exactly. And then also in terms of like just the mitzvahs and boundaries and limits that really the Torah gives us a blueprint for this, that those also help to create a mensch. So even if we're the most empathetic mothers, because we have Torah, we still have boundaries that are very, very much a part of everyday Yiddishkeit. Right? Your child might be hungry, but yet they still need to pause to make that bracha or wash for a mitzi. And, a child is playing with something muksa, but we're going to remind them that it's Shabbos and they need to put it down. And for an older kid, having the self-control to wait for Kiddush or Havdalah, but for eating only in the sukkah, not sitting on Tati's chair. So just empathy, like you're saying, the ani, it's all about me. Just that empathy and that self-compassion is, it's okay. Right? Only your feelings are the important factor in your life. But that's supremely unhealthy, and it doesn't produce a healthy, well-balanced individual. The boundaries and expectations of halacha are so much a part of the equation as well. So again, just to summarize, the path to emotionally healthy children is not going to be reached by pursuing emotional health in and of itself. That can't be our goal. Our goal is to help our children be aligned with their truth and purpose, which is the truth and purpose of their neshama. And when they are raised in that reality, really steeped in Torah values, performing mitzvahs and applying Hasidic concepts to their struggles and triumphs, the byproduct will be emotional health and not, as the Rebbe says, chas shalom, psychological distress.
Wow. So if I understand what you're saying, you're not putting down empathy. You're just saying that's not the be all and end all of raising a mensch. It might be sometimes necessary, but the be all and end all of raising a mensch is raising someone who's living, with alignment with their true self. Like people talk all the time about being their real me, but like a real me for a yid. And the Rebbe says that the psyche of a yid is the neshama of a yid. This is our psyche. And, you started talking a little bit like about boundaries though, we were talking about empathy and then you went to boundaries, in boundaries, you spoke about like mooks and things like that. But what does that look like in terms of boundaries with parenting, like in terms of like expectations people have for kids, another context of boundaries?
Right. So children need boundaries to become a mensch, which is really knowing how to behave in any setting that they find themselves in. And different settings call for us to behave differently in, meaning like there's like unwritten rules of conduct. You go to the bank, you go to the airport, you're in a classroom, you're in your home. There are different social norms and different ways to react and act and rules to follow that are very much also a part of becoming a mensch. And this is our job as parents. It's our responsibility to teach our children how to become a mensch, how they can be successful in any environment and setting that they find themselves in. If we don't set boundaries and enforce boundaries, then children only think about themselves and don't necessarily understand the workings of the world. There's a book called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier, which is about the unfortunate transgender craze that's going on these days. And she wonders about something. She wonders whether the transgender craze isn't partially the result of overly coddled children who are desperate to stake out territory for rebellion. These are children who are raised with few walls and they look for barriers to knock down. She wonders if like all this open-mindedness by mothers these days hasn't robbed their children of the rebellion that they so badly seem to want. That maybe if their moms had put down their foot about, something smaller going on, maybe the child would have declared victory and deemed their war of independence a success. She's basically saying that raising children without boundaries is not without its consequences. And
in other words, children will try to push boundaries. So if they have none, they'll find the most extreme version to push.
Exactly. They'll keep going because in reality, there's a security that comes with boundaries, and it's also part of the process that children go through to become more independent and feel their independence. Especially we see this with toddlers. They're wired to push boundaries, and even teenagers in some ways as well. But just for us to know, like, this is part of the process, and there's such a safety and security when you know that your parents, like the captain of your ship, that they're in control. They have you. They're here to help you, even when it seems strict on our part. There's actually a letter from the Rebbe where he quotes the pasuk in Mishlei from Shlomo Melech that he who spares a rod hates his son, right? The Rebbe says that laxity in this, and we know, of course, that the rod is not a physical stick. The Rebbe says that laxity in this area would represent hatred for our children, and experience has shown us that these children who are not properly and strictly brought up, but were raised with a liberal, free upbringing, came back to their parents later with serious complaints. Eventually, they blame their rod-sparing parents and teachers for their personal behavior and their unmodified negative inclinations and traits. The firm education rod is the best favor for the child. And this is the English translation of the Rebbe's words.
Wow. Estee, I'm so grateful for this whole bit about boundaries in general. I think this is something personally that I need to focus on and work more, and that maybe doesn't come as naturally to me. Like I don't naturally see or set the boundaries, and I'm realizing how important it really is to raising a mensch. So I'm grateful for you bringing this to the forefront.
So you're one of many, because I see in my parenting practice that this is something that comes up again and again and again. And it's really a result of us really overvaluing the empathy and the compassion and the flexibility, et cetera. And this is exactly where fathers come into the picture. Fathers could help out with exactly this.
Okay, so that's interesting. Because until now we were talking about the role of mothers. Can you expound on that more? Like, where fathers come to the picture and what, our children need from...
Sure. So children need boundaries, not just to be set, but also to be enforced. And children need encouragement. They really need to be pushed hard. They need to be pushed to work hard, to accomplish, to achieve their goals. And fathers are specifically good at this. Dr. Warren Farrell, he's the author of a book called The Boy Crisis. And he actually shares research about many school shooters that it seems that they were raised only by mothers and with a lot of women in their lives and without fathers. So while they had many female relatives raising them, besides for a father not being in the picture, there weren't male role models either. So they were raised primarily by women. And the effect of that is that they didn't develop very vital part of themselves because they lacked that father figure or the influence of men in their lives. So just as in relationships between husband and wife, right, there's this masculine and female energy, the mashpia and the makabel, there's also really a different energy that fathers and mothers have when it comes to parenting. So let's talk about the different roles and energies. Mothers are generally, by nature, more nurturing and compassionate. Hashem designed it this way. Mothers are generally the ones who spend more time with their children, right? We take care of their basic needs. The first few years of life, we're feeding them, diapering them, holding them, comforting them. And as time goes on as well, we're the ones who teach them skills such as how to eat with a spoon, tie your shoes, etc. Right? We're kind of like involved in the nitty gritty details of our children's lives, doing homework with them, serving them meals, wiping their tears, hearing about the school drama. And we tend to have more compassion and empathy within all of these details, right? We're more accommodating and flexible. This is generally the nature of women. Whereas fathers, right, tend to be less involved, not just in the physical amount of time. I mean, in the past, men were out working in the field. They really weren't even home as much, but also in their approach of how they deal with children. As a whole, fathers tend to focus more on the bigger picture and be less empathetic. For example, when it comes to bedtime, right, mothers tend to be more lenient. Like, oh, you need a drink? Okay, sure. You forgot to study for a test? Okay, go do it now quickly. Like those details are all very important for us to make sure they're all okay. Whereas fathers, it's bedtime now, time to go to bed. So the fathers are the providers. They're the protectors, and their parenting style is generally more firm and less flexible. Fathers hold children to a high standard, and they encourage them to do difficult things, and they don't lose sight of the big picture goals that they have of their children, especially their sons. And they generally believe that children should be held to higher standards than the mothers do. So take, for example, competitive sports, right? Even on the school playgrounds, lots of mothers think that there should be no competitive sports. Everyone's a winner. And the fathers generally believe in their son's ability to tolerate healthy competition. Good, let him work harder and he'll get better at it, right? It might not be an easy process, but the pride and feeling of accomplishment and of newfound abilities that the child has after going through this process that the father pushes him into gives him a much needed boost in confidence. And all that, hard work pays off. And this is the father energy. This is the energy that the father brings to parenting. In terms of mothering, mothers, we kind of see how it makes sense and how it pans out. When the mother is involved in every step of the way, she's very much involved in the training and in the process. So she has the process front and center. Like this, this child is having a hard time with this right now. This is what I'm doing with this kid now. The father, though, he wants to see and be involved with the achievement of it, the end goal, the results, the bigger picture. So, when mothers are sharing, look, Tati, David learned how to tie his shoe, or, Sarah got a great mark on her test. Rabbi Manis Friedman actually says the mother is like the teacher and the father is like the principal. And Shlomo Melech's words about he who spares a rod hates the child. It, like we said before, it doesn't refer to a physical stick. And actually part of that letter of the Rebbe that I didn't quote, it actually says that the means to effective education, it must incorporate a strong approach to form the positive personality of the child, to rid him of unsavory dispositions.
You have that letter? I'd love to be able to share that.
Absolutely. Yes, it's from the book, Healthy in Body, Mind, and Spirit.
Because everyone's always quoting the love letters, which, and which are so important in chinuch, but we can't forget that there's also, like you said, there's the mother's softness and the father's strength, and the kid needs both.
Absolutely. And the more that we believe that, the better off our child is for it. So this idea of, the rod is this idea of being firm and unbending in principles. That's really where the father comes in. The fathers are generally more firm, and they should be unbending in their principles. And the child needs both the mother and the father, not two mothers and not two fathers. And this is really the most perfect balance for the child. A mother who's nurturing and empathetic and loves a child for just who they are right here, right now. And the father who has these high expectations of him and holds a child to such a high standard to reach his potential and purpose.
Today, there's a lot of talk about like toxic masculinity. It's so interesting how you're talking about the different role of the mother and fathers, because I think a lot of women have fear of their husband's strength. And it's almost like men today are like, the women make them out to be like too tough, too rough, not soft, too strong. And I'm talking about in the general world, women call that toxic. And I think it's just valuable to just remind ourselves that Hashem did create men and women differently. There's the whole Mashpia Makabel concept, and that it's important, like everything you're just saying, the mother role, the father role, and that they're wired differently. I think that we can drop the fear.
The truth is that secular culture and trends, unfortunately, does seep into our society too. And without realizing it, we just adopt certain values that don't serve us well and that are in conflict with what our real values are. So you're right with what you're saying. And many mothers actually, unfortunately, become very controlling in this way. Like with the best of intentions, they convince themselves that they're training the fathers to be better fathers, when in reality, they're not really allowing their husbands to be fathers at all, the way fathers are supposed to be. So like in this process of wanting to refine the father, the wife could also emasculate him, and maybe with the best of intentions, but it's inadvertently stripping the father of his natural male energy. And this also could cause conflict in the parents' relationship with each other, which definitely doesn't help the children in any way. But then taking it even a step further, when the mothers need support in their parenting, and sometimes the child being in the mother's presence so much with the mother's help at every step of the way could feel a little bit too comfortable with the mother. And then that's where a father figure could really help out in this way. But if fathers have been like emasculated in this way, then they know, unfortunately, and this happens too many times, where the father really no longer feels confident in his role as father, or the fathers are afraid to be too strict because of the forthcoming criticism, or they don't even want to be viewed by their children as the firm, unbending parent, because the child has already gotten that message from the mother. When Tati acts a certain way, it's too mean, it's too harsh. So we don't want to strip them from the role that they are naturally meant to fill. And it's a role that's so necessary for the child, and it's so supportive to the mother. Her empathy and his firm enforcement of boundaries are really the perfect combination. The male energy that fathers bring to the home is extremely necessary. Also for the children to have a certain strength to them, especially for boys who really need that male strength. And, it's not a bad thing for men to learn to be gentler at times, just as it's not a bad thing for mothers to learn how to be extra firm with their children or give them that extra boost of courage and resilience. But the fact remains that we have natural energies, and it's most important to remember children need the mother and father energy, and they differ. They're different, and both together are the most perfect combination to raise a mensch. The sooner that we could really believe this, that we embody different energies, our children will benefit greatly from the balance of the different energies, and we start to see things fall into place. Our homes become happier and healthier and more stable.
It's almost like you could deprive your child of something he needs by trying to interfere with a man's natural approach. And you also end up depriving yourself of something that could be supportive to you.
Yes, exactly. We deprive ourselves of strong support from our husbands that can really help us in parenting our children. A father telling a child, you can't talk to mommy like that. You need to find more respectful ways to communicate. The father being the one to say that. That is more impactful than you saying that to your child about yourself, right? And worst of all, like you said, we deprive our kids of this important male energy, which helps raise them to their full potential with resilience and strength to face the world, right? We don't want to overcoddle them. And it's this wonderful balance that they get both from us, their mothers.
And this probably used to be a given. Like it has to be said today because of the upside downness in the world.
We tend to go to extremes. Maybe, our generation growing up felt that we had more gevura. So we're coming now from a place of like, we need extreme kindness and compassion, but really any extreme is not good. It's very clear that any extreme is really, really unhealthy. So practically, right, what are some ways that we could allow our husbands to be their best selves in their role? First, we really need to trust that what they bring to the table is there for a purpose. And then in the moment, really trust that their response is the correct response, even if it feels less refined to you or even harsher than how you would do it or how you think it should be done. Number one is just trust that, even if it's different than what you think it should be. Again, because you have this new belief now that this is meant to be different than the way I do it. And then, of course, later on in conversation, you could always discuss with your husband, the 30 minutes a day focusing on thinking about our children's chinuch. That's where we think about, how did I respond? You could get input. We could get input from each other as a couple to talk about how we could do things better. There's so much value in that. But in that moment, really trusting whatever it was meant to be this way. And then when we respect our husband in this way, our children learn to respect their father as well. And then there are many, many ways that we could uphold and maintain the respect for the Tati, in our home. No one sits on Tati's chair. We serve Tati dinner first. We don't start eating until the father starts eating. We don't interrupt Tati when he's speaking. And then if there's negative behavior with children saying, I need to discuss it with Tati when he gets home, but also in the positive way. I can't wait to show Tati your test. He'll be so proud. It's putting the father on a pedestal, which comes with extra respect. Wow. And, also it's really much more effective when as parents, we uphold and maintain the respect for the other parents more so than of ourselves. So we need to make sure that our children are speaking and treating their father respectfully. And the father should make sure that the children are treating and speaking to the mother respectfully. It's much, much more effective when you do it for the other.
Wow. We started off the conversation talking about emotional health. And what I'm really hearing from you is that the concepts in Torah and Chassidus have this natural outcome of emotional well-being. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful how we're able to bring it out. And I think that people are searching so much because they might not have experienced all of it. They might not have experienced Torah in its true form. Maybe they were missing joy and simcha, or maybe they were, they were missing some of the psychological components of it. So there's this search, and it's so beautiful to actually hear that you don't need to search. In other words, that Chassidus has it. And even if you didn't get the full measure of it growing up, you could still access it today. There are people who know how to. And even hearing you just take these concepts of Chassidus and say it with such confidence, it's amazing. And it's really the recipe.
You know what? These ideas, they no longer have to be abstract, lofty ideas. These days, we have so many Hasidic masters explaining real Hasidus, explaining Tanya in the most relevant and relatable ways to the average person. And it's exactly how the Alter Rebbe intended it to be. Integrating all this into our life when it's brought down on our level, it really could resonate so deeply. All the psychology we seek, it's really here for our taking. Podcasts, shiurim, the language and ideas are readily available to us now. I guess we tend to mistakenly believe that this idea of delving deep into understanding our psyche and into what motivates our behaviors and different methods of how to change our behavior, we tend to think that it could only be offered to us through someone with a degree in psychology. And these days, that is just simply not the truth. We could learn from Tanya and learn from Chassidus how to be our best selves. And it's so relatable when we just start opening ourselves to realize it's here for our taking. And it might be difficult in the beginning. Maybe it will seem not so applicable. Maybe some ideas won't resonate. Don't give up. Keep going, because we're seeing more and more and more that Chassidus has all the psychology that we seek. And maybe years ago, Mashpim would say that, and some Mashpim didn't quite know how to make it relevant and relatable. It was all your problems could be healed and helped with Chassidus, but some didn't necessarily know how to actually help the person through the process with those concepts. But these days, again, the podcast, the shiurim, how it relates to trauma and behaviors and reactions and emotional intelligence, it's all there. It's all there for our taking.
Yeah, I just saw a class. I didn't listen to it, but I love the title. Rabbi Simon Jacobson, I should say, how trauma affects us, but how your godly soul, something along the lines of like, has the ability to overcome it and that you have everything within you and the ability to overcome it. But what I want to push back a little bit, Estee, is that, yeah, there's definitely value and wisdom and everything Hasidus, but it's almost like you're pushing back against therapy. And I feel like people would say that we finally overcame the stigma of therapy and we finally normalized sending our kids to therapy. And when they have an issue, like bringing them to therapy and like, almost like what's up with pushing back against that?
I hear you.
Bringing kids to therapy, a good thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to adults and therapy, it's a process. And sometimes a therapy is needed to help parents become more open to understanding how Hasidus could help. And so it's a process and it varies from person to person. So I'm not commenting on therapy for adults. It has its time and place sometimes, but also whichever adult is in therapy, to also just know that even while they're going through therapy, Hasidus also has so much value to bring to their lives and help with the therapeutic process. But I do want to talk about therapy with children. It kind of seems like a trend nowadays that every kid has a diagnosis and every kid needs therapy. And I'm talking about mainstream children. It's like there's so many issues and everything just needs help. It really feels unfair to me when we put the burden of change on a child. Because in reality, as adults, as the teachers, and as the parents, we are the ones who create their environment. And a lot of their behaviors and anxieties and difficulties stem from the very environment that they're in, the environment that we control, we create and control. So putting this onus of responsibility on them just doesn't feel appropriate. It's like, it's making it all their problem. Well, most of the time, it's not their problem. Hashem created them in the way in which he intended, with their strengths and their challenges, which are very often intertwined. And it's hard, I guess, for adults to admit that we might be the problem, but really, we need to get the help that we need. And the help that we get will help our child, and in a much shorter amount of time than sending a child for months of therapy. It's not fear of us to place the burden of responsibility to change on the child. We're the ones who have to change, and we're the ones who have to meet the child's needs.
Can you give an example?
Okay, in school, it might be about social issues where schools could take that responsibility for realizing that these children are in their environment, and learning how to engage socially in proper ways doesn't happen in a vacuum. It needs to be taught. There needs to be creative curriculum about it. There needs to be part of the conversation that happens when a child is having a hard time socially for whatever reason, either it's bullying or whatever. It's so easy to say, like, take him for therapy, but then the process of helping him is happening in an environment different than what he's normally in, and where he or she is experiencing this difficulty. Or for example, at home, when a child is extremely difficult and having a very difficult time with the relationship with a parent, and feels that the parent doesn't like them, or feels the parent doesn't understand them, or whatever else it might be. It's so easy to say, I've tried everything, I'm doing all the right things. We might be doing everything right, but sometimes we have to ask ourselves difficult questions. Is there something different that I can do here? Is there something more that needs to be done? Because at the end of the day, they're in our environment. And the more that we could understand their needs and make some changes so that their relationship with us is better, the more receptive they are to the chinuch that we impart, the more they can be influenced by us and learn to be their best self. It's almost like, like outsourcing to a therapist is, we can make the biggest impact. And when I say parents, I'm also including other adults, include Bubby, include Zadie, include an uncle, include an old teacher. There are so many people who could take this place of, if we feel the need to outsource, to really influence our child in the most positive of ways. It doesn't need to come through a therapist.
Okay. You gave me a lot of food for thought. Estee, you're okay if some people might think this is controversial?
I hope it's not. It's definitely something that I've thought a lot about, and I know I don't usually put myself out like this either on a platform. I usually, I love doing things in small groups. I love the relationship aspect of working one-on-one with clients. So putting myself out here in this way is definitely going out of my comfort zone. But this feels like the kind of message that I've seen a certain trend in my practice of parenting, and I feel like these messages are so empowering if we can understand what the Rebbe is really saying. It's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to prevent psychological distress. We're trying to create emotionally healthy children, and just knowing that we have to stay true to our source. And when we meet the needs of the child's nefesh elokis, that is helping him be his best self, because then that takes away the inner conflict. We're trying to avoid inner conflict. Psychological distress is inner conflict. And the fact that we have this nefesh elokis means that our way of parenting, we can't just follow everyone that we see on Instagram. Yes, some of it is good, but we have something so much more than that. And our children, their needs are different as well. And that's what we're trying to address here. And that's what, I hope this is not controversial. I hope people understand where this is coming from. And it's a lot of work on our part as parents. Even myself, it's constant work. You don't just reach this place where you're just doing everything right. It's really understanding that self-growth and parenting are very, very intertwined. And when we want children to grow, we have to know that the self-growth has to be very real on our part. That's where it starts.
Wow. Thank you so much. This was so insightful. I hope you all enjoyed listening to it today. Thanks for listening to another episode. Please subscribe, share with friends. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much, Estee.
Thank you.